Our story tonight, The Quilt. This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel. In one sense, it's part of a process that's been ongoing for the better part of a generation. Homosexuals who, for most of this country's history at least, concealed who and what they were, have been publicly asserting their identity for years now. But it was AIDS which seems to have made that trend irreversible. And what is happening in Washington tonight and what is scheduled to happen here tomorrow morning is a public declaration designed to be seen and acknowledged. It says that the 42,000 who have died, a few of them women, many of them IV drug users, but most of them gay men, were loved and cherished by parents, brothers, and sisters who were not like them, who frequently did not understand them while they were alive, and by others who were very much like them, and who may soon themselves die of AIDS. The Names Project, the 16-ton quilt, which will be unfolded on the ellipse behind the White House tomorrow morning, is at one and the same time huge and garish, but made up of small, poignant, and intimate declarations of love.
I have real mixed emotions about doing this because he was a real private person. And as you notice, we don't use his last name. And he was a very virile, masculine, handsome man. And he didn't want to be thought of ever as a person who had AIDS, ever. So I don't know if it's a therapeutic part of it is, because I feel that these people, these brothers and sons, have to be remembered.
Peter Martell, John Becker, Don Denny.
These people were loved and respected and cared about enough that someone went to the incredible effort and pain of creating a memorial to them so that everybody could know, so that the whole world would know, so that when that name is read, that they're there, and that person's not gone. They're still there. But each one is a life that's gone. And that's so, you have to keep reminding yourself that while this is a successful project, it is only resting on a pyramid of bones. It is only successful because it is a tragedy.
Actually, we were prepared to make a quilt in memory of our son, my son, and our brother, one that he would be ashamed of.
Right. I mean,
That's
just it. Well, he was a graphic designer. Yeah, beautiful taste. He taught me how to look at everything through a design eyes.
Kevin Adams, Richard Luther, Fernando Delgado.
This is for our son. That was done by our grandson in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had seen a picture of it before from our daughter who saw it in New Orleans. And we'd heard about it since it was made a year ago. But today is the first that we saw of it, and it was moving.
We were prepared for it, but actually to see it was something else.
People are writing stuff on there, Mom.
They're writing dedications, those kinds of things that you just read.
My dear friend from Don, I will always think of you. To accept, to love, to miss, to remember, to understand, to help each other, for all of my friends past.
People go from the panel that they came to see, and all of the emotion and energy that they have brought from that, they take over to the signature square and write it down. And it can be a few simple words, but it can be the most powerful words you ever read.
We're doing his signature on here. He loved to write his signature.
Yeah, it was his middle name. His middle initial, L, was really important to him. We worked together for about 12 or 13 years. We were partners. Really good partners, though. I mean, we really clicked. We had a consultant once on doing some market research who told us that she'd never seen people communicate with so little language, because we could just read each other so well. I sure miss that.
William Smith, Mark Cardwell, Jimmy Ray Harrison, John Benjamin.
This is Justin Smith, young man, early 20s, who had kind of been disowned by his family. And we used to talk a lot about life. Kind of sad that he's not around to tell me some more.
We're talking about a chronicle of a very diverse culture, a slice of a kaleidoscope of people. And so we have the women, we have the men, we have the children, we have the hemophiliacs, we just have the people as a chronicle of our time, and it's so huge and it is so beautiful. It is proof that there is beauty in all things, even tragedy.
So you just want to put names around here?
I like to put compassionate, caring, good-hearted, generous, loving, all those things.
Yeah. On the border here. We're going to write his qualities. He's very compassionate and sensitive and kind and creative.
Courageous.
Hot-tempered. Well, he wasn't perfect, boy, that's for sure, but... And then the nieces and nephews want to write something about their uncle. And I want to say goodbye in a personal way.
Mitch S.
We ran out of space, quite literally, to hang all of the panels that were turned in from this area. And they will become a part now of the National Quilt. As a part of the closing ceremony, then we wanted to make sure that people had a chance for their own personal involvement with that, whether they were a panel maker or a member of the family, to be able to present their panel to the National Quilt. There's a finality to that. That is a saying goodbye. It's like a closing of a chapter. A very emotional time. Time to let go, a time to remember.
Jeffrey Lynn Lunsman. Ron McIntyre.
When we come back, we'll be joined by Cleve Jones, who conceived the idea for the AIDS quilt, by Pat Levy, whose son died of AIDS and who is taking part in the project, and by another contributor to the quilt, Garth Wall, who has himself been diagnosed as suffering from AIDS.
And to my surprise, hundreds and hundreds of people showed up with these signs. And at the end of the evening, we taped them up on the walls of the Federal Building in San Francisco. And it was when I was looking at that sort of patchwork of names that I said to myself, it looks like a quilt. And when I said the word quilt, it evoked such warm and comforting memories. I thought of my grandmother and the quilt that's been passed down through generations in our family. And I thought, well, this is the perfect symbol to match with this horrible disease that nobody wants to look at or talk about. I didn't do anything about it, though, for a full year. And then my best friend, a man named Marvin Feldman, died in 1986. And it was a terrible loss for me, a real blow. And I created the first quilt panel as a way of trying to get through my own depression and sorrow. And then it began to spread by word of mouth. And we opened an office in August, just a little more than a year ago, in San Francisco.
Now, Mrs. Levy, we are going from the totality here of the project to one panel that is particularly meaningful. And in fact, as we talk, I'm going to ask our producer to put up the panel that your family made and ask you why. Why did you make it, and what kind of a catharsis was it for you to do it?
I made it because I loved my son, and I wanted him remembered in this special way. with the special group of people who had died of this awful disease. I spread it out in the entry hall of my home, and since I don't sew, I used paint. We had a family reunion a month prior to making the panel, and I made shirts for everyone in the family with the paint. So I used the same paint so Michael would be included in the family reunion.
And the catharsis, has it been that? Has it provided you with any comfort? Even, I mean, I don't know if joy is too strong a word to use, but has it done anything for you?
Oh, it really did. I was very angry when I made it. I really was. And I'd say, Michael, why did you die? So now I have to be on my hands and knees painting a panel for you. But as I made it, and as I put each letter on, and I thought about each year of his life and how wonderful a son he was, by the end of it, and I cried, and the teardrops are on there, but by the end of it, I did feel better. Not good, but better.
Was this something that Michael had shared with you, that he was gay, that he had AIDS? Did he share that with you from the very beginning, or was that something you both came to exchange much later on in his life?
Much later on. I knew Michael was gay. We knew Michael was gay way before he admitted it to us. It was very hard for him to accept. Very hard. He had some very hard years. But he finally did. He accepted himself, and we told him it didn't matter. We loved him because he was our son. We didn't care. And then he really had a great life. He had a good job. He had wonderful friends, male and female, married, single. He loved his job, and he was really getting his life going great. And then he became ill, but he never shared with us what his illness was. At least not with me. He told his dad, but not me.
We're going to have to take a break. We'll meet Garth Wall when we come back, and of course we will continue our discussion in a moment. Continuing our discussion now with Garth Wall. Garth, why and for whom did you make a panel?
Well, I made a panel for Doug Ridley initially. He was my partner who was diagnosed with AIDS and died in 1985. And during the next year, I had quite a bit of anxiety myself about developing AIDS. And on the anniversary of his death, I too was diagnosed. Quite a bit of emotion came out of me at that time, of course, but I could tell that I had a lot dammed up inside of me. And the panel, making the panel for him became quite the obvious route for me to take, which was the beginning of several panels that I made for friends.
You're really uniquely placed, precisely because you have AIDS yourself, to tell us if you fall victim to the disease also. Do you think it will make any difference if someone else then is making a panel? Does that give you any sense of fulfillment, continuity, whatever?
Well, absolutely. I having AIDS, I guess I'm around it all the time. It doesn't really bother me to be faced with it on a day-to-day basis. And watching people make panels, sometimes I even wonder what my panel would look like. But it's a very cathartic experience.
The extraordinary thing, as we looked at that videotape, the wonderful videotape report, which in a sense was kind of a quilt of its own at the top of this broadcast, and you see the various survivors coming, the parents who seem frequently bewildered, the lovers in some cases, the brothers and sisters, the young children, the nieces and the nephews. What do you think it's doing for those people as they walk along those white corridors between the quilts?
Well, actually, you don't even need to make a panel to feel that catharsis. You get close to the panels, and I'm sure that everybody else is experiencing the anger and the fear, in some cases even the joy, full range of emotions. You can see it in their faces. I've seen women taking their husbands probably unwillingly, their husbands to the quilt display, and before too long, even their eyes are moist.
Mrs. Levy, I'm sure you're going to be there tomorrow when the quilt is unfolded on the ellipse. You've done this before, right? You've walked among the many quilts.
Yes, when the quilt was in St. Louis, my husband and I were the hosts and hostess for the city. And it was there for 2.5 days, and I never left. I couldn't bear to leave it. It's so beautiful, and it's so meaningful. So sad.
How, to what degree does it raise consciousness? I mean, I know you talked to one of our producers before the program and said that the city of St. Louis, the mayor of St. Louis, was sort of denying that AIDS is a problem in that city.
Well, the city of St. Louis, the metro St. Louis area is 1.5 million to 2 million people. We had 10,000 people come to see the quilt. That should tell you right there.
What does it tell you?
It tells me that the people in St. Louis are complacent and think it's not going to get to them. It'll never, ever affect them. It will. It will affect us all. It's affecting us all right now.
We're going to take another break, and we'll talk once again with Cleve Jones when we return. We'll continue our discussion in a moment. Continuing our discussion now with the originator of the Names Project, the Quilt, Cleve Jones. What's it accomplished? You raised $400,000, which goes to what, AIDS research?
No, we raise money for those agencies that provide direct services to people with AIDS and their families. We have 3 goals as an organization. Our first is to illustrate the enormity of the worldwide AIDS crisis by attempting to reveal something of the lives and the faces that are behind the statistics. Secondly, we want to reach out to all the many, many different kinds of people whose lives have been invaded by this disease, and we want to offer them a creative and a positive means of expression, both to help them emotionally get through the grieving process and also to help to break the silence that surrounds this disease. And thirdly, we want to offer the whole world, but especially our own country, a very clear example of how compassionate, kind people respond to a tragedy like this. And we think that the quilt helps open people's hearts to the reality of the disease, and we find that they respond with a great deal of love and generosity. So we are a fairly successful fundraising mechanism, but that's not our total purpose, of course.
I'm a rather pragmatic fella, Cleve, so
we try to be too.
Well, then let me ask you some pragmatic questions.
Sure.
Legislation. In all the communities that you've been, can you point to a city council or a town council that has changed any legislation where something has been amended or where a new law has been passed that is somehow a little more compassionate or a little more helpful to the gay community?
That's not our function. We are not a political organization, and we do not take any position on the political issues that surround the disease. We're not naive, though. We understand that the American people and local and state and the federal government have to make some important decisions. What we're trying to do is encourage people to base those decisions on compassion and respect for the individual. And our position is that there doesn't need to be this conflict between the scientific approach and the compassionate approach. We say that the pragmatic, logical approach is also the loving and respectful one. So we don't attempt to influence government bodies at all by directly lobbying on legislation. We hope to touch their hearts, though, and one of the reasons we're here in Washington is to try and show to the members of Congress and the President what our experience has been so that they can better understand what the situation is and then respond appropriately.
Is the project over? I mean,
No.
do you retire the quilt? Do you put it up on some huge shelf or into a warehouse? What happens to the quilt now?
The quilt is meant to be used, and the people who make the panels know that we tour with the quilt and that we use it to raise money and bring a greater awareness. So we're going to continue to tour with the quilt nationally and internationally. We're working closely with the World Health Organization, and we're finding that the quilt's message, even though it's based on a very American folk art, has a message that's understood by many different cultures, and the idea is spreading very rapidly.
Well, I thank all three of you very much. I wish you good luck in your project, and I'm sure that a great many Americans will be touched tomorrow as they wander up and down the ellipse and between the various panels of the quilt. Cleve Jones, Pat Levy, Gus Wall, thank you very much for being with us. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Still to come on News 4, a 9-acre message of sadness and hope on the ellipse. We'll tell you about that.